"Hello, sir. That man over there makes Grandma cry every day." Most people ran from Kim Ju when they saw his tattoos, but 6-year-old Anna didn't run. She pointed at the devil and asked the dragon for help. The wind howled through the cracked pavement of Detroit's forgotten district, carrying with it the scent of snow and desperation. 6-year-old Anna didn't shiver, even though her pink puffer jacket was 2 sizes too small. She stood like a statue, her small finger extended, pointing accusingly at the man screaming at her grandmother. Most people would have run. Most grown men would have looked away. But Anna looked up at the stranger crouching beside her, a man with ink crawling up his neck like dragon scales and eyes as cold as the ice on the ground. "He makes Grandma cry all day," she whispered, her voice cutting through the shouting in the background. "Make him stop." Kim Ju, the man who had buried empires and shattered bones for a living, looked from the little girl's trembling finger to the thug terrorizing the elderly woman. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. He just stood up. And for the first time in years, the devil decided to do God's work. "Hello, family. Where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments so I can send you special regards. And also, hit the subscribe button to subscribe to this channel so as not to miss our daily videos. Now let's dive into the story. Ruth was tired. It was a bone-deep exhaustion that sleep couldn't fix, the kind that came from working double shifts at the diner just to pay rent for an apartment that had no heat. She loved her mother and her daughter, Anna, more than life itself, but love didn't pay the electric bill, and it certainly didn't keep the wolves at bay. The biggest wolf was Viper, a low-level slumlord who got his kicks from intimidating the elderly. Every day, Ruth left for work praying her mother wouldn't be on the street when she returned. She didn't know that today, the dynamic of their freezing neighborhood was about to shift. A predator from a much bigger jungle had moved into the building down the street. Kim Ju wasn't looking for trouble, he was looking for invisibility. But when a child demands justice, even a monster has to listen. The winter in this part of the city was unforgiving. It wasn't just the temperature, it was the grayness of it all. The sky was a flat sheet of slate, pressing down on the crumbling brick buildings. Kim Ju sat on the frozen steps of a stoop 3 houses down from his own hideout. He took a drag from a cigarette, the smoke curling up to mix with the visible vapor of his breath. He was wearing a white dress shirt, the sleeves rolled down to cover the intricate tapestry of tattoos that mapped his history of violence, but the collar couldn't hide the black ink creeping up his neck. He was trying to be invisible, a ghost in a machine that had spat him out. After the coup in Seoul, after his own brother had sold him out to the triads, Kim Ju had come here to wait, to heal, to plan his revenge. He flicked the ash, his dark eyes scanning the street. He hated this place. It smelled of poverty and defeat. "Hey." The voice was small, tiny really. Kim Ju didn't jump, but his muscles tightened instinctively. He looked down. Standing at the bottom of the steps was a child. She was a little black girl, wrapped in a puffy pink and black jacket that looked like it had seen better days. She wore a pink knitted beanie pulled low over her forehead. Her eyes were large, brown, and entirely unafraid. Kim Ju stared at her. Children usually avoided him. Dogs barked at him. He had an aura, a palpable weight of danger that hung around him like a heavy coat. "You have drawings on your neck," the girl said, stating a fact. Kim Ju took another drag, his expression stony. "Go home, kid." "I can't," she said. "The bad man is there." Kim Ju's eyes narrowed slightly. He didn't care about neighborhood squabbles. He had dismantled organized crime syndicates. He didn't deal with domestic disputes. He turned his head to look away, dismissing her. But then a sound drifted down the wind. It was a sound that Kim Ju, for all his hardness, hated. The sound of an old woman weeping. He looked back at the girl. She wasn't looking at him anymore. She was pointing. He followed the line of her small, brown finger. Across the street, in front of a peeling gray building, a man in a black leather jacket and tan pants was screaming. He was aggressive, his body language violent, looming over an elderly woman who was sitting on a folding chair in the snow. She was clutching a walking cane, her head bowed, her shoulders shaking with sobs. "He says we have to give him more money," the girl said, her voice trembling slightly now. "Mama paid him, I saw her, but he says it's not enough." He kicked Grandma's chair. Kim Ju watched the man, Viper, the locals called him, a bottom feeder, a parasite who fed on those who couldn't fight back. Viper kicked the snow near the old woman's feet, making her flinch. "He makes Grandma cry all day," the girl whispered, looking up at Kim Ju. "You look strong, you look like the monsters in my book, but maybe you can scare the bad man. Make him stop." The request hung in the freezing air. Kim Ju dropped his cigarette and crushed it beneath his polished black shoe. He shouldn't get involved. The first rule of hiding was do not draw attention. Helping a civilian was messy. It was stupid. It was weak. He looked at the girl. She was shivering, but her finger was still pointing, steady as a compass needle. "What is your name?" Kim Ju asked, his voice a deep rumble, accented and rough. "Anna," she said. Kim Ju stood up. He towered over her, his broad shoulders blocking the wind. He crouched down, bringing his face level with hers. For a second, the mask of the Mafia boss slipped, revealing just a man. "Wait here, Anna." He walked across the street. He didn't run. He moved with a predatory grace, a silent glide over the ice. Viper was too busy screaming to hear death approaching. "I told you, you old hag. The heating cost went up. You pay another 200 by tonight or I throw your junk on the street. I don't care if it's freezing." The grandmother, Ruth's mother, sobbed harder. "Please, sir, my daughter. She works so hard." "I don't care about your daughter." Viper raised his hand as if to backhand the air near her face. A hand clamped onto Viper's shoulder. It wasn't a shove. It was a grip like a hydraulic press. Viper froze. He tried to shrug it off, turning around with a snarl. "Who the hell?" The words died in his throat. Kim Ju was staring at him. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't grimacing. His face was completely blank, devoid of any human emotion, which made it infinitely more terrifying. The tattoos on his neck seemed to writhe as he tilted his head. "The lady," Kim Ju said softly, his English precise but clipped. "She is crying." Viper, a man used to bullying widows and orphans, looked at the scar running through Kim Ju's eyebrow and the deadness in his eyes. He realized instantly that he was out of his depth. This wasn't a street fighter. This was a killer. "Look, man, this ain't your business," Viper stammered, trying to pull away. He couldn't move. Kim Ju's fingers were digging into his trapezius muscle, hitting a nerve that sent blinding pain down Viper's arm. "It is loud," Kim Ju continued, as if Viper hadn't spoken. "I do not like loud noises, and I do not like men who stand over women sitting in chairs." Kim Ju leaned in closer. "Apologize." "What?" Viper squeaked. Kim Ju squeezed. Viper's knees buckled. He dropped to the slushy pavement, forced down to the grandmother's eye level. "Apologize to the grandmother," Kim Ju commanded. "And if I hear you asking for money that has already been paid, I will remove your tongue so you can never ask for anything again. Do you understand?" Viper nodded frantically, tears of pain pricking his eyes. "I understand. I'm sorry. Ma'am, I'm sorry." Kim Ju released him. Viper scrambled back, crab walking on the ice, looking terrified. "Go," Kim Ju said. Viper ran. He didn't look back. Kim Ju turned to the elderly woman. She was staring at him with wide, fearful eyes. She had seen violence before, but she had never seen violence controlled like that. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice shaking. Kim Ju didn't smile. He bowed, a sharp, formal Korean bow from the waist, showing respect to an elder. Then he turned and looked across the street. Anna was still standing there. She lowered her finger. A small, tentative smile broke across her face. Kim Ju turned up the collar of his coat against the wind and walked away, disappearing into the alleyway shadows before anyone else could see his face. Ruth's feet throbbed in rhythm with her heartbeat. The bus ride home was 45 minutes of stopping and starting, the air inside stale and smelling of wet wool. She shifted her weight, gripping the plastic handle of her grocery bag. Inside were 3 eggs, a loaf of discount bread, and a carton of milk. That was dinner. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She ignored it. It was probably the electric company, or worse, Viper calling to harass her mother again. The thought of Viper made her stomach turn. He had been escalating lately. First, it was just late fees that didn't exist. Now it was threats of eviction. Ruth was a strong woman. She had raised Anna alone after her husband passed. She worked 6 days a week, and she never let Anna see her cry, but Viper was breaking her down. She felt powerless. She stepped off the bus, bracing herself against the biting wind. The streetlights flickered overhead, casting long, jumping shadows on the snow. As she turned the corner toward her apartment building, she clenched her jaw, preparing for the usual sight. Viper's truck parked on the curb, maybe him standing there smoking, waiting to make a comment about her body or demand cash. But the truck wasn't there. The street was quiet, unusually quiet. Ruth hurried to the front door of her building. She fumbled with her keys, her hands shaking from the cold. When she stepped into the lobby, she stopped dead in her tracks. The heat was on. The radiator in the hallway, which had been broken since November, was clanking and hissing, radiating a glorious, impossible warmth. The air didn't smell like mildew. It smelled clean. "Mama," Ruth called out, rushing up the stairs to their second-floor unit. She burst through the door. "Mom, Anna." She expected to find them huddled under blankets in the living room, shivering. Instead, her mother, Ruth S.R., was sitting in her favorite armchair, not wearing her heavy coat for the first time in weeks. The TV was playing softly. Anna was on the floor, coloring in a book. "Ruthie, you're home," her mother said, looking up. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but she looked peaceful. "What happened?" Ruth dropped the groceries on the table. "Why is the heat on? Did Viper come by?" "He came," Anna said, not looking up from her coloring. "But the dragon man scared him away." Ruth froze. "The what?" Her mother sighed, adjusting her glasses. "It was the strangest thing, Ruthie. That awful man, Viper, he was screaming at me outside this afternoon. I thought he was going to hit me. I truly did." She paused, her hand trembling slightly as she reached for her tea. "And then, this man came over. An Asian man, very handsome, but, oh, Ruth, he looked dangerous. He had tattoos on his neck." Ruth's heart hammered against her ribs. "A gang member? Mom, did he hurt you?" "No," her mother shook her head vigorously. "He made Viper apologize. He made him get down on his knees in the snow. And then Viper ran away and came back an hour later with a toolbox and fixed the boiler. He didn't say a word, just fixed it and left." Ruth sank onto the sofa. This didn't make sense. In this neighborhood, nobody helped anybody, especially not dangerous men in suits. Who is he? Did he ask for money? Favors? "No," Anna piped up. She held up her drawing. It was a crude crayon picture of a large man in a white shirt standing next to a small girl in pink. "I asked him to help. I told him he makes Grandma cry, so he fixed it." "You spoke to him." Ruth grabbed Anna's shoulders, panic rising in her throat. "Anna, you know the rules. You don't talk to strangers, especially not men like that." "He's not a stranger," Anna said stubbornly. "He's the neighbor. He lives in the gray house. He smokes on the steps. He looked sad, Mama, until I told him about the bad man." Ruth stood up and walked to the window. She pulled back the curtain just an inch. Across the street, the gray house stood dark and silent. It had been abandoned for months, or so she thought. "He bowed to me, Ruthie," her mother added softly. "Like a gentleman. I haven't been treated with that kind of respect in I don't know how long." Ruth stared at the dark house. She knew the world. She knew that men who could terrify thugs like Viper were usually worse than Viper. They were sharks eating minnows. If this man had marked her family as his protection, it meant they were on his radar. "Stay away from the windows," Ruth said, closing the curtain. "And if you see him again, Anna, you run the other way. Do you hear me?" "But he's nice." "He is not nice, Anna," Ruth snapped, her fear leaking out as anger. Nice men don't have neck tattoos and make drug dealers kneel in the snow. He is dangerous. She went to the kitchen to unpack the eggs, her hands still shaking. The warmth of the apartment felt suspicious now. It felt like a trap. She was grateful the heat was on, grateful her mother wasn't crying. But she couldn't shake the feeling that they had just traded a known devil for an unknown god, and gods usually demanded sacrifices. 3 days passed. The heat stayed on. Viper was nowhere to be seen. Rumor had it he was avoiding the block entirely. The neighborhood was eerily peaceful. Ruth couldn't relax. Every time she walked Anna to the school bus, she scanned the shadows. Every time she walked home, she held her keys between her knuckles like a weapon. It was Friday evening when she finally saw him. She was rushing to the corner bodega to buy cough syrup for Anna, who had developed a slight sniffle despite the restored heating. The snow was falling heavily, muffling the sounds of the city. As she exited the shop, clutching the small paper bag, she nearly ran into a wall. It wasn't a wall, it was a chest. A broad, solid chest covered in a heavy black wool coat. Ruth gasped and stumbled back, slipping on a patch of black ice. She flailed, waiting for the impact of the cold pavement. It never came. A hand shot out, lightning fast, and grabbed her forearm. The grip was firm, stabilizing her instantly. "Careful," a deep voice rumbled. Ruth looked up and up. He was taller than she expected. His hair was black, styled back but messy from the wind. His face was angular, with high cheekbones and a jawline that looked like it could cut glass. But it was the eyes that stopped her breath. They were dark, almost black, and incredibly weary. And there, peeking out from the collar of his coat, was the tail of a dragon tattoo. It was him, the dragon man. Ruth yanked her arm away as if he burned her. She stepped back, putting distance between them. "You," she breathed. Kim Ju looked at her. He recognized her instantly. She had the same eyes as the little girl, Anna. She was beautiful, even with the exhaustion etched into her face. Her hair was pulled back in tight braids, and her coat was worn at the seams. She looked like a woman who carried the weight of the world on her shoulders. "You are the mother," Kim Ju stated. "I am," Ruth said, her voice shaking but defiant. She drew herself up to her full height. She wasn't a tall woman, but she had the ferocity of a mother bear. "My daughter told me what happened with Viper." Kim Ju nodded once slowly. He put his hands in his coat pockets. "The heating is working." "Yes," Ruth said, "it is." "Good." He turned to walk away. "Wait," Ruth called out. Kim Ju stopped and turned halfway back. Ruth struggled with the warring emotions inside her, gratitude and fear. "I appreciate what you did for my mother. No one has ever stood up for us like that. Thank you." Kim Ju watched her. He wasn't used to gratitude. He was used to fear and obedience. It was nothing. "But," Ruth continued, her voice hardening, "I also know what kind of men have ink like that. I know what kind of men make people like Viper disappear." Kim Ju's expression didn't change. "Do you?" "Yes," Ruth said, stepping closer, her finger pointing at him much like Anna's had. "I don't know why you're here or who you're hiding from, but Anna, she's just a baby. She thinks you're a hero from a storybook. You're not." "No," Kim Ju agreed softly. "I am not." "So stay away from her," Ruth said, her voice cracking slightly. "Please, we are barely holding on. I can't have your world spilling into ours if you want to help us. Ignore us." Kim Ju looked at this woman, shivering in the snow, threatening a Mafia boss to protect her child. He felt a strange pang in his chest, a memory of his own mother, perhaps, or just a longing for something simple that he had never had. "I will not approach your child," Kim Ju promised. "You have my word." He turned to leave again. "Ruth." The voice came from behind Ruth. She spun around. Her mother was standing at the entrance of their building, leaning on her cane, bundled up in a shawl. She had evidently come down to wait for Ruth. "Mom, go inside," Ruth said quickly. "Oh, it's you." Grandma beamed, ignoring her daughter and looking straight at Kim Ju. "The gentleman, I didn't catch your name the other day." Kim Ju hesitated. He should walk away. He had just promised Ruth. But disrespecting an elder was impossible for him. He bowed his head slightly. "Kim Ju, ma'am." "Mr. Kim," Grandma smiled warmly. "I was just telling Ruthie that I made too much pepper soup. It's a cold night. A man living alone in that big empty house shouldn't be eating cold food." "Mom, no," Ruth hissed under her breath. "You must come in for dinner," Grandma insisted, waving her hand. "As a thank you, I insist." Kim Ju looked at Ruth. Her eyes were pleading with him to say no, to leave, to disappear. But then he looked at the grandmother. She was looking at him not as a killer, but as a neighbor, a human being. "I would be honored," Kim Ju said. Ruth let out a sharp breath of frustration. She glared at him, but she couldn't make a scene in front of her mother. "Fine," Ruth muttered, clutching her grocery bag tighter. "But just dinner. Then you go back to your world and we stay in ours." Kim Ju met her gaze. The electricity between them wasn't romantic yet. It was the tension of a predator and a protector sizing each other up. "Just dinner," Kim Ju agreed. As he followed them into the warm, brightly lit building, leaving the cold darkness of the street behind, Kim Ju felt a sensation he hadn't felt in 20 years. He felt like he was coming home. But across the street, in the shadow of an alleyway, a black sedan with tinted windows rolled slowly to a stop. The engine idled silently, watching the three of them disappear inside. The apartment smelled of Scotch bonnet peppers, thyme, and simmering goat meat. A rich, earthy aroma that clashed violently with a sterile, metallic scent of blood and gunpowder that usually clung to Kim Ju's memory. He sat at a small, wobbly formica table that seemed barely strong enough to hold the large pot Ruth's mother, Grandma Rose, had placed in the center. The kitchen was tiny. His broad shoulders felt like they were brushing against the cabinets on both sides. He felt absurdly oversized in the delicate, domestic space, a bull in a very cluttered china shop. "Eat, eat, Mr. Kim," Grandma Rose urged, ladling a massive portion of the dark, spicy soup into a plastic bowl. "You're too thin, all bone and ink." Kim Ju accepted the bowl with two hands, bowing his head slightly. "Thank you, ma'am." Across the table, Ruth watched him over the rim of her water glass. She hadn't relaxed a single muscle since they entered the apartment. Her eyes tracked his every move, how he held the spoon, how he politely declined a second piece of bread, how his gaze kept flickering toward the front door, assessing the locks. Anna sat beside him, was oblivious to the tension. She was practically vibrating with excitement, showing Kim Ju her collection of colorful plastic bracelets between spoonfuls of soup. "This one is blue," Anna said, holding up a neon bangle. "Blue is for ice, like your eyes." Ruth choked on her water. "Anna, that's rude." Kim Ju paused, the spoon halfway to his mouth. He looked at the little girl. No one had ever compared his eyes to something as innocent as ice. Usually, they said they were dead or shark-like. "It is okay," Kim Ju said, his voice low. He looked at Anna, and for the briefest second, the corner of his mouth twitched upward. It wasn't quite a smile, but it was close. "Blue is a good color." Anna beamed. "See, Mama, he likes it." The dinner was an exercise in surrealism for Ruth. Here was a man who had terrified the neighborhood bully into submission with a mere touch, sitting in her kitchen, eating pepper soup, and discussing bracelet colors with her 6-year-old. He was impeccably polite to her mother, answering her endless questions about his homeland with vague, respectful generalities, never once revealing the violent reality of the sole syndicate he had once ruled. Yet the danger radiated off him. When he reached for the salt, his cuff pulled back, revealing more of the intricate, dark artwork on his forearm, a coiled snake amidst cherry blossoms. Ruth saw the thick, pale line of an old knife scar intersecting the tattoo. As the meal wound down, Anna began to yawn. "Time for bed, little bird," Grandma Rose said, standing up slowly. "But I want to show Mr. Kim my drawing of the cat." Anna protested. Another time, Ruth said firmly, standing up to clear the bowls. Kim Ju stood immediately. I should go. I have imposed enough. Nonsense. Grandma Rose waved him down. Ruthie, help me to my room. My knee is acting up. Mr. Kim, you stay for tea. It's rude to rush a guest. Ruth shot a look of pure exasperation at her mother, but she couldn't refuse to help her. Stay right there, she ordered Kim Ju, pointing a finger at him before helping her mother down the narrow hallway. Kim Ju was left alone in the kitchen. The silence settled heavily. He walked to the sink, intending to wash his bowl, a habit ingrained from years of disciplined living. As he turned on the water, his eyes drifted to the small window above the sink that looked out onto the fire escape. Below in the alley, the snow was undisturbed, but his instincts, honed by 2 decades of constant threat, were screaming. The hair on his arms stood up. It felt like being watched through a sniper scope. Ruth returned to the kitchen, her arms crossed. They're asleep. You can leave now. Kim Ju shut off the water. He turned to face her, drying his hands on a dish towel. The domesticity of the action was jarring against the intensity of his gaze. Your locks, Kim Ju said, his voice dropping to a murmur so as not to wake the others. They are insufficient. Ruth bristled. Excuse me, my locks are fine. The landlord put them in. Viper put them in, Kim Ju corrected. A child with a hairpin could bypass the deadbolt in 10 seconds. The screws on the strike plate are too short, one solid kick and the frame splinters. Ruth felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter draft. Why are you telling me this? Are you planning on kicking my door in? Kim Ju took a step closer, invading her personal space just enough to make her heart rate spike. He wasn't threatening her, but he was forcing her to see him, really see him. You were right outside the store, Ruth, he said, using her name for the first time. It sounded heavy on his tongue. I am not a hero. The world I come from, it is a disease, and it is contagious. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek black object, a burner phone. He placed it on the counter. If you see anything, a car that does not belong, a face you do not know, or if Viper returns, you call the number stored in there. Only that number. Ruth stared at the phone as if it were a grenade. You're scaring me. Good, Kim Ju said, his eyes bleak. Fear keeps you alert. Alert keeps you alive. He moved toward the door. As he passed her, he paused, his hand hovering near her shoulder but not touching. Thank you for the soup. It was warm. Before Ruth could formulate a response, before she could ask the 100 questions swirling in her head, he was gone. The door clicked shut behind him. Ruth immediately threw the deadbolt. She stared at the flimsy metal hardware, seeing it through his eyes now. It looked pathetic. She looked at the burner phone on the counter. Its single green light blinked slowly in the semi-darkness, a digital eye watching over them, a promise of protection, and a warning of the danger that had just sat at her table. Kim Ju didn't sleep that night. He sat in the dark living room of the abandoned gray house across the street, smoking cigarette after cigarette, the ember glowing like a sentinel's eye in the gloom. He had made a mistake, a tactical error born of weakness. He had let them in. Going to dinner had been an indulgence. For an hour, sitting in that warm, cluttered kitchen, smelling spices instead of fear, he had pretended he was a normal man. He had pretended that the ink on his skin was just art, not a resume of brutality. He had let Anna's laughter droop his guard. And because of that, he had almost missed it. When he had left Ruth's building, he hadn't gone straight home. He had circled the block, melting into the shadows, moving with the silent tread of a hunter. He found the car parked 2 streets over, tucked behind an overflowing dumpster. It was a black sedan, nondescript, domestic make. To the untrained eye, it was just another car covered in city grime. To Kim Ju, it screamed surveillance. The windows were tinted too dark. The tires were high-performance, out of place in this neighborhood of rusted-out beaters. He hadn't approached it. He didn't need to. He knew who sent it. Choi. His former lieutenant. the man who had smiled in his face while selling his location to the triads in Seoul. Choi was ambitious, cruel, and lacked the code of honor that Kim Joo still desperately clung to. If Choi was here, it meant he hadn't just come to kill Kim Joo. He had come to make an example of him. He would burn down everything Kim Joo touched before delivering the final blow. And tonight, Kim Joo had touched Ruth's family. As dawn broke, painting the gray sky with bruised purples and reds, Kim Joo made a decision. It was the only logical choice, the only moral choice. He began to pack. He didn't have much. A duffel bag of cash hidden under the floorboards, 2 spare magazines for his Glock 19, a passport with a different name. He moved efficiently, erasing his presence. He would leave the city today. He would draw Choi's wolves away from this street, lead them on a chase across state lines, and finish this somewhere far from pepper soup and blue bracelets. By 8:00 a.m., he was ready. He threw the duffel bag over his shoulder, turned up his collar, and stepped out onto the snowy porch. The cold air hit his face, sharp and clarifying. He looked across the street at Ruth's building. He needed to leave now before they woke up, before complications arose. Mr. Dragon. Kim Joo froze. He closed his eyes for a second, cursing the universe. Anna was standing on the sidewalk below, bundled in her snow gear, waiting for the school bus. Ruth was standing beside her, holding her hand tight. Anna waved frantically, her mittened hand a bright spot of color against the snow. Kim Joo slowly walked down the steps. He couldn't just ignore her. That would be cruel. He would say a quick, cold goodbye and leave. As he approached, Ruth pulled Anna slightly closer to her leg. Her eyes darted from his face to the heavy duffel bag on his shoulder. "You're leaving," Ruth said. It wasn't a question. Her voice was flat, guarded. "Yes," Kim Joo said, not stopping, intending to walk past them toward the bus stop. "It is time." "Where are you going?" Anna asked, her lower lip trembling. "Are you coming back for dinner?" Kim Joo stopped. He looked down at the child. Lying to adults was easy. Lying to children felt like a sin. "No, Anna, I have to go far away." "Because of the bad men," Anna whispered. Kim Joo looked sharply at Ruth. "She heard us talking last night," Ruth admitted quietly, her eyes anxious. "She's smart. She knows something is wrong." "They are not bad men, Anna," Kim Joo said, his voice strained. "They are just men from my work, and I must go before my work follows me here." "But who will scare Viper?" Anna asked, a tear spilling over and tracking down her cold, reddened cheek. "Who will make sure Grandma doesn't cry?" The question hit Kim Joo harder than a physical blow. He looked at Ruth. Ruth was looking at him, and the fear he expected to see in her eyes wasn't there. Instead, there was a terrifying realization. "You're running away," Ruth said, her voice low and furious. "You brought this here, you put a target on our backs by walking into our home, and now you're just going to leave us to deal with the fallout." "I am leaving to protect you," Kim Joo hissed, leaning in, his intense eyes bearing down on her. "The men looking for me, if they find me here, they will burn this whole block down just to smoke me out. They do not care about women or children." "They already know where you are, don't they?" Ruth challenged, glancing at the duffel bag. "That's why you're running today, you saw something." Kim Joo didn't answer. His silence was confirmation enough. The yellow school bus rumbled around the corner, its brakes screeching in the frozen air. "Go to school, Anna," Ruth said, her voice shaking but firm. She didn't look away from Kim Joo. Anna looked between the two adults, sensing the seismic shift in the air. She hugged her mother's leg, then, shockingly, ran forward and hugged Kim Joo's knee, her small arms barely reaching around his leg. "Don't go," she murmured into his coat. Then she turned and ran to the bus. Ruth watched the bus pull away. When it was gone, she turned on Kim Joo, her fear transforming into a mother's blind rage. "You coward," she spat. "You think leaving now fixes this? Viper is watching. The whole neighborhood saw you go into my apartment last night. If those men you're running from come looking, who do you think is the first person they're going to ask about you? Me, my mother. Kim Ju stared at her. He hadn't considered that. He assumed if the target was gone, the threat would dissipate. He had forgotten how thorough Choi was. Choi wouldn't just chase the prey, he would salt the earth where the prey had rested. If you leave, Ruth said, stepping closer, her breath clouding between them, we are alone with whatever you left behind. You want to protect us. Then stay and finish what you started. Kim Ju looked at the duffel bag on his shoulder. It felt heavy with cowardice now. He looked at the flimsy front door of her building. He thought of Grandma Rose's soup and Anna's blue bracelet and the terrifying vulnerability of this woman standing up to a monster in the snow. He realized with a sickening jolt that she was right. He couldn't outrun this. Not anymore. The infection had already spread. Slowly, deliberately, Kim Ju slipped the duffel bag off his shoulder and let it drop onto the frozen sidewalk. The sound was heavy, final. Go inside, Kim Ju said, his voice changing. The hesitation was gone. The weariness was replaced by a cold, razor-sharp focus. The dragon was awake. Call your boss. Tell him you are sick. Do not leave the apartment today. Do not open the door for anyone but me. Ruth stared at the bag in the snow, then up at his face. The change in him was terrifying, but also strangely reassuring. What are you going to do? She whispered. Kim Ju turned his gaze toward the end of the street, toward where the black sedan had been parked. I'm going to work. Kim Ju didn't go to the abandoned house. He walked straight into Ruth's building, carrying his duffel bag like a sack of cement. He didn't knock on her apartment door. He used the key. Ruth had been sitting on the couch, her phone in her hand, trying to work up the courage to call her diner manager. She jumped when the deadbolt clicked open. How did you? I lifted it from your coat pocket last night when you were helping your mother, Kim Ju said calmly, stepping inside and closing the door. He locked the deadbolt, then wedged a heavy dining chair under the doorknob. Ruth stood up, her heart hammering. You stole my key. I borrowed it. I needed to know how easy it was. He dropped the duffel bag in the middle of the living room floor. The thud it made sounded metallic. Grandma Rose shuffled out of her bedroom, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Mr. Kim, is that you? Here for breakfast. Mom, go back to your room, Ruth said, her voice tight with panic. Ma'am, Kim Ju said, his voice gentle but leaving no room for argument. Please do as your daughter says. Close the door and stay away from the windows. Something in his tone made the elderly woman pause. She looked from Ruth's pale face to Kim Ju's grim expression and nodded slowly. All right. She retreated, closing her door with a soft click. Kim Ju knelt by the duffel bag and unzipped it. Ruth gasped. Nestled on top of stacks of $100 bills was a matte black handgun. It looked sleek, efficient, and horrifyingly out of place on her worn carpet. What is that? Ruth whispered, backing away until her legs hit the sofa. A Glock 19, Kim Ju said, picking it up and checking the chamber with a swift, practiced metallic clack-clack. This is the reality of my world, Ruth. You wanted me to stay. This is what staying looks like. He stood up and walked to the window, peering through the crack in the curtains. The street was quiet, but it was a deceptive quiet. The tension in the air was thick enough to choke on. They will wait until dark, Kim Ju murmured, almost to himself. Choi prefers the shadows. He will send a scout first to confirm I am here, then a strike team. 3 men, maybe 4, they will come through the back alley, try the fire escape. He turned away from the window and looked at Ruth. She was trembling, her hands clutched over her mouth. Ruth, he said her name sharply to snap her out of it. Look at me. She lowered her hands, her eyes wide with terror. Panic is a luxury you cannot afford right now, he said coldly. You are the mother. You are the line between them and Anna. You need to be iron. He walked over to her, invading her space, forcing her to focus on him. He held out the gun, grip first. Ruth shook her head frantically, backing away. No, I can't. I hate guns. Get it away from me. Take it. His voice was a command, guttural and harsh. I said no. Kim Joo grabbed her wrist. His grip was iron, just like it had been with Viper, but this time there was desperation behind it. He forced the gun into her shaking palm, molding her fingers around the grip. It is heavy, she whimpered, tears spilling down her face. It felt cold and alien in her hand, a weight of death. It is a tool, he corrected. He stood behind her. Adjusting her stance, his large hands covering hers, guiding her arms up. The proximity was suffocating. She could smell the faint scent of cigarette smoke and an underlying metallic tang on him. Listen to me, he whispered near her ear, his voice intense. There is no safety on this model. The safety is your finger. Keep it off the trigger until you are ready to destroy what is in front of you. Do not aim it unless you intend to kill. Do you understand? I can't kill anyone, she sobbed. If a man comes through that door who is not me and he moves toward your mother's room, you will not see a man, Kim Joo said darkly. You will see a threat to Anna, and you will pull the trigger until it stops moving. You will do it because you are a mother. He released her. Ruth stood there, trembling, holding the weapon with both hands, staring down the sights at her own front door. The weight of it was sickening, but under the sickness, a strange, cold resolve began to form. He was right. For Anna, she would burn the world down. Good, Kim Joo said, seeing the shift in her posture. Keep it near you. I have work to do. He spent the next hour turning the apartment into a fortress. He moved the heavy sofa in front of the large bay window. He went into the kitchen and rigged a crude alarm system using pots and pans balanced precariously by the fire escape window. Around noon, there was a timid knock at the door. Ruth jumped, nearly dropping the gun she had placed on the coffee table. Kim Joo was at the door instantly, peering through the peephole. He tensed, then looked back at Ruth with a confused frown. He moved the chair and unlocked the deadbolt, opening the door just an inch. It was Viper. The slumlord looked pathetic. His nose was bandaged where Kim Joo had shoved his face into the snow days prior. He was shivering, holding a wrench like a talisman. What do you want? Kim Joo asked, his voice ice. Viper gulped, looking past Kim Joo into the barricaded apartment. Look, man, I don't like you. You almost broke my neck. Get to the point. There were guys, Viper whispered, glancing nervously down the hallway. Last night, at the bar down on 5th. Asian guys, suits. Not from around here. They were asking questions about the neighborhood, about who lives on this block. Kim Joo's eyes narrowed. Did they show a picture? Viper nodded. Of you, they asked if anyone had seen a guy with the neck tattoos. What did you tell them? Kim Joo asked, his hand drifting toward the small of his back where he had tucked a second weapon. Viper shifted his weight. I told them I ain't seen nobody like that. Told them to get lost. Kim Joo paused, surprised. Why? Viper spat on the hallway floor. Because you're an asshole, man, but you're our asshole, those guys. They felt wrong, like dead fish eyes. They scared the crap out of me. He hefted the wrench weakly. I don't want whatever they're selling in my building. Bad for business. It was a twisted sort of loyalty, born of territory and fear, but it was loyalty nonetheless. Go to your basement apartment, Kim Joo said. Lock the door. If you hear shooting, stay down. Viper nodded frantically and bolted toward the stairs. Kim Joo closed the door and replaced the barricade. He turned to Ruth. They are asking questions, he said flatly. Tonight, it happens tonight. Ruth sat on the edge of the armchair, the gun resting on her lap. The morning light was fading, the shadows stretching long across the floor. The siege had begun. The darkness in the apartment was absolute, save for the thin sliver of amber street lamp light bleeding through the gap where the sofa didn't quite cover the bay window. The silence was heavy, a physical weight pressing against Ruth's chest. She sat on the floor with her back against her mother's bedroom door, the heavy Glock 19 resting on her knees. Her fingers were cramping from gripping it so tight. Kim Ju was a statue by the kitchen entry. He hadn't moved in 2 hours. He was listening to things Ruth couldn't hear, the settling of the building, the wind in the alley, the breathing of the city. "Mama," Anna's voice came from inside the bedroom, small and sleepy. "Hush, baby," Ruth whispered, her voice cracking. "Go back to sleep." Clang crash. The sound of metal pots clattering to the floor in the kitchen shattered the silence like a bomb. Kim Ju moved before the sound even finished echoing. "Kitchen window!" he roared, abandoning stealth. The air exploded with noise. Glass shattered inward as a black-clad figure swung through the fire escape window, kicking the rigged pots aside. Kim Ju met him with a brutal shoulder charge, driving the intruder back against the refrigerator. The sickening crunch of bone against metal was audible across the room. "Stay down," Kim Ju shouted at Ruth. Ruth scrambled backward, raising the gun with shaking hands. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. 2 more men poured through the window. They were fast, efficient, moving like water. Kim Ju was a whirlwind of violence. He didn't fight like a brawler, he fought like a machine. He ducked under a swinging crowbar, grabbed the attacker's arm, and twisted it with a snap, sending the man howling to the floor. But there were too many of them. "Front door," Kim Ju yelled, realizing the strategy too late. The kitchen assault was a distraction. The front door, barricaded by the chair and the deadbolt, didn't just open, it exploded inward. A heavy battering ram smashed the lock mechanism to splinters. The door swung wide, hitting the wall with a deafening thud. Ruth screamed, swinging the gun toward the doorway. A man in a tactical vest stepped in. He wasn't looking at Kim Ju, he was looking at the bedroom door. "No," Ruth shrieked. She squeezed the trigger. Bang. The recoil nearly tore the gun from her hand. The shot went wide, shattering a vase on the hallway table. The deafening report rang in her ears, disorienting her. Before she could aim again, a boot kicked the gun from her hand. A gloved hand grabbed her by the hair and threw her aside. She slammed into the wall, stars bursting in her vision. "Secure the target," the man yelled. The bedroom door opened. Grandma Rose stood there, holding her cane up like a weapon, shielding Anna behind her. Get out of my house." The intruder simply shoved the elderly woman. Grandma Rose fell hard onto the carpet, crying out in pain. "Grandma," Anna screamed, rushing forward. That was the mistake. The intruder scooped Anna up in one fluid motion. She kicked and screamed, flailing her small fists against his tactical vest. "I have the girl. Move. Anna," Ruth scrambled on her hands and knees, trying to grab the man's leg. He kicked her backward, hard in the ribs. She gasped, the air leaving her lungs. Kim Ju was still in the kitchen, fighting 2 men. He heard Anna scream. The sound tore through his composure. He roared, a primal, animalistic sound, and grabbed the nearest attacker by the throat, slamming his head into the granite countertop with lethal force. The man went limp. Kim Ju threw him aside and sprinted for the living room, ignoring the knife slash across his forearm from the second attacker. He was too late. The man with Anna was already in the hallway. 2 others were covering his retreat with suppressed pistols. Thwip thwip. Bullets chewed up the drywall inches from Kim Ju's face, forcing him to dive behind the overturned sofa. "Clear out, go." The footsteps thundered down the hallway. The front door was left hanging off its hinges. Silence rushed back into the room, louder and more terrible than the noise. "Anna," Ruth's scream was raw, a sound of pure agony. She crawled toward the door, ignoring the pain in her ribs. "Anna, come back." Kim Ju stood up slowly from behind the sofa. Blood dripped from his arm onto the carpet. His chest heaved. He looked at the open door, then at Ruth, who was sobbing on the floor, and finally at Grandma Rose, who was groaning in pain near the bedroom. He had failed. Ruth pulled herself up, stumbling toward him. Her face was a mask of tear-streaked fury. She hammered her fists against his chest. "You let them take her, you promised." she screamed, hitting him over and over. You brought this here, you monster, get her back, get her back. Kim Joo didn't defend himself. He stood there and took every blow, his face stone cold, though his eyes were burning with a hellfire that hadn't been seen since his days in Seoul. He deserved her hate. He had tried to play house, and because of that, a child was gone. He caught Ruth's wrists gently, stopping her assault. Ruth, he said. His voice was terrifyingly calm. It was the voice of the dragon. She looked up at him, shaking, drowning in panic. Check your mother, he commanded. Barricade the door with the sofa. Do not open it. Where are you going? She choked out. They took my baby. Kim Joo walked to the duffel bag on the floor. He reached in and pulled out 2 extra magazines for his Glock, sliding them into his belt. He took a long, serrated knife and sheathed it at his waist. He walked to the door, stepping over the debris of the shattered lock. He turned back to look at her one last time. The human mask was gone. The neighbor who ate pepper soup was gone. I am going to get her, Kim Joo said, and I am going to make sure that everyone who touched her wishes they had never been born. He stepped out into the dark hallway and disappeared. The warehouse district by the Detroit River was a graveyard of industry. Rusted skeletons of old factories loomed against the snowy sky, their broken windows looking like hollow eyes. The wind off the water was brutal, carrying ice crystals that stung exposed skin. Choi's temporary stronghold was an old textile mill at the end of a dead-end road. It was isolated, defensible, and quiet. Inside, the vast floor was lit by portable halogen work lights that cast harsh, long shadows. In the center of the room, on a folding chair, sat Anna. She was shivering, not just from the cold. The building had no heat, but from terror. Her pink puffer jacket was dirty. Her hands were zip-tied loosely in front of her. Choi stood before her. He was a handsome man in a bespoke suit that cost more than the building they were standing in. He smoked a thin cigarette, looking at the child with mild curiosity. So, Choi said in Korean, then switched to heavily accented English. You are the pet the dragon adopted. Cute. Anna didn't answer. She bit her lip, remembering what her mama always told her, be brave. She looked around. There were 6 men guarding the perimeter, all armed with automatic rifles. He will come for you, Choi said, flicking ash onto the concrete floor. And when he does, I will kill him in front of you. It will be a good lesson in loyalty. Suddenly, the lights flickered. A low, grinding noise echoed from the far end of the warehouse, the sound of a heavy metal door being forced open. Check it, Choi barked at 2 of his men. The 2 guards raised their rifles and walked toward the shadows of the shipping bay. Hey, who's there? Silence. Then a sound, snicked, the sound of a blade clearing a sheath. One guard gasped, a wet, gurgling sound. He dropped his rifle and clutched his throat, collapsing to the ground. The second guard spun around, firing blindly into the dark. Rat-a-tat-tat, the muzzle flashes illuminated the space in strobe light bursts. In the flashes, Anna saw him. He wasn't wearing his coat anymore. He was in his white dress shirt, now stained with grime and blood. He moved not like a man, but like a phantom. He slid under the gunfire, closing the distance instantly. He swept the guard's legs, driving a knee into the man's chest as he fell, silencing him with a single brutal punch. It's him, a guard on the catwalk shouted. Kill him. All hell broke loose. Bullets chewed up the concrete floor around Kim Joo. He rolled behind a rusted pillar, debris raining down on him. He pulled the Glock 19 from his waistband. He took a breath, 1 second, 2 seconds. He swung out, bang, bang. 2 shots. 2 bodies dropped from the catwalk, landing with heavy thuds on the floor below. Kim Joo began to move forward. He was a force of nature. He didn't run, he advanced. He moved from cover to cover, returning fire with terrifying precision. He wasn't shooting to suppress, he was shooting to terminate. Choi grabbed Anna by the collar of her jacket, hauling her up. He pulled a silver pistol and pressed it to her temple. Stop, Choi screamed, or I paint the floor with her. Kim Joo froze. He was 10 meters away, standing in the open, his chest heaving. His white shirt was torn at the shoulder, revealing the dragon tattoo that wrapped over his deltoid. Blood from a graze on his cheek ran down his neck, mingling with the ink. Drop the gun, Kim Joo, Choi yelled, his eyes manic. Look at you look like a stray dog. Kim Joo slowly lowered his gun. He locked eyes with Anna. She was crying now, trembling violently. It is okay, Anna, Kim Joo said. His voice was steady, cutting through the chaos. Close your eyes. Drop it, Choi shrieked. Kim Joo dropped the gun. It clattered on the concrete. Kick it away. Kim Joo kicked it. Choi laughed, a cruel, high-pitched sound. The great dragon, brought low by a little girl. You are weak, brother. You were always weak. You care too much. I am not your brother, Kim Joo said softly, and I am not weak. Kim Joo's eyes flicked to the side. He had memorized the layout of the room in the seconds he entered. There was a rusted chain hanging from a ceiling hoist, dangling just a few feet behind Choi's head. Say goodbye, Choi sneered, cocking the hammer of his pistol. Anna, Kim Joo shouted, duck. Anna didn't hesitate. She dropped her weight, going limp and falling toward the floor, dragging Choi's arm down with her. In that split second, Kim Joo didn't lunge for Choi. He lunged for a heavy iron lever on the wall next to him, the release for the overhead crane. He yanked it down with all his weight. The rusted chain behind Choi swung violently as the brake released. The heavy steel hook at the end of it slammed into the back of Choi's head with a sickening crack. Choi crumpled forward, unconscious before he hit the ground. Kim Joo was there in an instant. He kicked Choi's gun away and scooped Anna up into his arms. I got you, he whispered into her hair, hugging her tight against his blood-soaked chest. I got you. Anna clung to him, burying her face in his neck. I knew you'd come. I told him the dragon would come. Kim Joo looked down at Choi, who was groaning on the floor. The police sirens were wailing in the distance. Ruth must have finally called them, ignoring his orders. Good. Kim Joo knelt and picked up his gun. He looked at Choi one last time. He could end it. He should end it. That was the code. But then he felt Anna's small heart beating against his chest. If he killed Choi now in front of her, he would be the monster she feared. He holstered the gun. He turned his back on his enemy and walked toward the exit, carrying the child through the snow, leaving the darkness behind him. The beep, beep, beep of the heart monitor was rhythmic and annoying. Kim Joo opened his eyes. The light was blindingly white. He blinked, trying to focus. He was in a hospital bed. His left arm was in a sling, and his chest felt like it had been trampled by a horse. He tried to sit up, but a hand gently pushed him back down. Stay down, tough guy. He looked to his right. Ruth was sitting in the uncomfortable hospital chair. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, but she was smiling. It was a real smile this time, not polite, not fearful, genuine. Anna, Kim Joo rasped. His throat was dry. She's fine, Ruth said, nodding toward the foot of the bed. Anna was curled up on the end of his mattress, fast asleep, clutching a stuffed bear that was missing an eye. Kim Joo let out a breath he felt like he'd been holding for days. And your mother. Bruised hip, but she's complaining about the hospital food, so she's fine, Ruth chuckled softly. She reached out and took Kim Joo's hand, the one that wasn't bandaged. Her skin was warm against his. The police, Kim Joo started. I need to leave before they run my prince. Relax, Ruth squeezed his hand. They came. Viper talked to them. He told them you're his cousin from overseas, working as a security contractor. He said those men broke in to rob the place and you defended us. The police bought it, mostly because they didn't want to do the paperwork on a gang war. Kim Joo stared at the ceiling. Viper covered for me. He seems to think you're the new sheriff in town, Ruth laughed. He's terrified of you, but he likes having a protector on the block. Kim Joo was silent for a moment. I cannot go back there, Ruth. It is not safe for you. Choi is in custody, but others will come. I have to go. Ruth's face fell. She looked at Anna sleeping at his feet. You're running again. I have money, Kim Joo said urgently. Hidden away, enough to set you up somewhere safe. A house in the suburbs, good schools for Anna. I will give it all to you, but I must leave. Ruth stood up. She walked to the window and looked out at the parking lot. You know, when you walked out that door to get her, I hated you, but when you walked back in carrying her, covered in blood, shivering. She turned to face him. You didn't look like a monster, Kim Joo. You looked like a father. She walked back to the bed and leaned over him. We don't want your money if it means you leave. We want you. I'm a danger to you, he insisted. Then buy the danger out, Ruth said simply. You said you have money. Fine, use it, buy the building, buy the block, make it a fortress, hire security. Be the king if you have to be, but be our king. Kim Joo looked at her. He looked at the determination in her eyes. He realized that this woman was stronger than he had ever given her credit for. She wasn't asking for a savior. She was asking for a partner. A slow smile spread across his face. It hurt his bruised cheek, but he didn't care. Buy the building, he mused. Viper will overcharge me. I'll handle negotiations, Ruth grinned. 6 months later, the winter gray had melted away, replaced by the vibrant green of a Michigan spring. The sidewalk in front of the apartment building was clean. There was no trash. Fresh flower boxes hung from the windows. Inside the lobby, the walls were freshly painted a warm cream color. The radiator hummed quietly, no longer clanking. Viper, wearing a blue jumpsuit with building manager embroidered on the pocket, was sweeping the steps. He whistled as he worked, stopping to tip his cap to Mrs. Higgins from 3B. Upstairs, in the penthouse apartment, which was really just 2 units knocked together, the air smelled of perfume and expensive hairspray. Ruth stood in front of the full-length mirror. Her white dress was simple but elegant, hugging her curves. Her hair was done up in an intricate style, woven with small white flowers. You look beautiful, Mama, Anna squealed, jumping on the bed. She was wearing a puffy pink flower girl dress that matched her personality perfectly. Grandma Rose sat in her armchair, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. My baby, finally getting a good man. The door opened. Kim Joo stepped in. He stopped in the doorway. He was wearing a black tuxedo, tailored to perfection. The high collar of his shirt and the cut of the jacket completely concealed the tattoos on his neck and arms. To the outside world, he looked like a successful businessman, perhaps an investor. But as he looked at Ruth, his eyes softened in a way that the outside world never saw. Bad luck to see the bride before the ceremony, Ruth teased, turning to face him. I make my own luck, Kim Joo said, walking over to her. He kissed her forehead gently. Are you nervous? Ruth whispered. I have faced down armies, Kim Joo whispered back. I have survived torture. I have walked through fire. He paused, looking at his shaking hands. Yes, I am terrified. Ruth laughed and kissed his cheek. Come on, Dad, Anna yelled, grabbing his hand. We're going to be late. The word hung in the air. Dad. Kim Joo looked down at the little girl who had once pointed a finger at him in the snow and demanded he be a hero. He squeezed her hand tight. Okay, princess, he said. Let's go. They walked out of the apartment together, the former Mafia boss, the single mother, and the fearless child, stepping out into the sunshine of a life they had built from the cold. The end. If you love this story, kindly hit the subscribe button to subscribe to this channel. And also, drop where your city in the comments.